Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It's indeed a great privilege and a high honor to be with you here today in May of 1865 in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Please allow me to introduce myself. I am General Samuel Cooper, and I come before you in the uniform that I recently surrendered to the Union Cavalry. I was, now retired since the Confederate States of America no longer exist, the top-ranking general of the Confederacy, reporting directly to Jefferson Davis. I know some of you have had some questions, and I wanted to comment on to answer some of your questions. But first, a word about the uniform, what I represented, and perhaps about Jefferson Davis. I am dressed as a staff officer, white sleeves, buff sash. I am in mourning for the fall of the Confederacy, for the death of President Lincoln, who we believe would have been, God rest his soul, a friend of the Confederacy, and of course the cockade for President Davis. President Davis was captured. We understand he's been imprisoned, and of course Vice President Stevens has been captured at his home as well. I surrendered to the Union Cavalry, and I was pardoned. They were quite gracious to allow me to come here in uniform just to talk to you. I believe one of the reasons that I might have been pardoned is that I disobeyed Jefferson Davis's last series of orders. He and Judith Benjamin and others of the Confederate cabinet, when Richmond and Petersburg were burning and fell, were destroying many of the records of the Confederate government. There was great fear within the cabinet about reprisals. Even General Lee, on April 8th and April 9th, when he showed up to meet General Grant, was unsure as to what reception he might have received. And of course, history tells us that the surrender terms were quite generous. Our brave men were pardoned, including the general. Officers were allowed to keep their sidearms and their horses, and they were sent home. And in the words of the general, and by the way, General Robert E. Lee and I were very, very close before he became the Supreme Commander and ultimately the General-in-Chief in February of 1865. He and I were the military advisors to Jefferson Davis in Richmond. General Cooper, of course, rode out to Manassas, 1st and 2nd Bull Run, and to Antietam to inspect the battlefield before, during, and after. So I was a very active part of the role, although many historians have called me a bureaucrat. That's quite all right. A little bit about the general. Born in 1798, attended West Point at age 15. Of course, in those days, West Point was only a 2-year curriculum. He graduated at age 17. He was breveted in the Mexican War. He was known as a horseman and quite good in artillery. 44 years in the Union Army. And how did I get to where I am before today, let's say in April 1st of 1865? I ran to Mobile, Alabama in March of 1861, and I volunteered my services to Jefferson Davis. We were pretty good friends pre-war. We knew each other in the Mexican War as well. And he was looking for a bureaucrat. He was looking for somebody to create the Confederate Army. He was looking for somebody to deal with quartermaster and just the overall structure and the regulations. And he asked me quite specifically not to take on a field command. He asked me to take on the role of Adjutant General and Inspector General of the Confederate forces, which I did. I was very loyal to Jefferson Davis, and he was tough. He's a tough boss to work for. In fact, in modern terms, we might call him a royal pain in the neck or some other part of the anatomy for that matter. It's a tough nut to work for. So I was given the top rank, much to the chagrin of Albert Sidney Johnson, who of course was our highest ranking field commander, who was number 2 in the structure. Many people do not know at that time Robert E. Lee was ranked number 3 amongst the full Confederate generals at the start of the war, followed by Joe Johnston. Ultimately, there were 8 full generals. Coincidentally, one of the things you may not know about General Cooper, in February of 1865, when General Robert E. Lee was promoted as the full general-in-chief of all of the armies, the order promoting General Lee was actually signed by General Cooper. And if I step out of role, I actually have a copy of that order. So where do I go from here? It's going to be tough. I owned a plantation outside of Alexandria. It was a beautiful farm, We had some slaves. We had a fair amount of money. But the feds took us over. They took over my beautiful farm, and what I'm told, I haven't been back yet, but what I'm told is what pretty much remains outside of federal hands at this point in time are the slave quarters and a little field that we could plant some corn and some other crops. It's going to be a tough time. And in the future, I know I can rely on my good friends, particularly Robert E. Lee, and in the future they will actually collect over $400 of U.S. currency, and the general falls on hard times, and they actually help him out. And that's the way he ends his life on his farm. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
All right.